Hello, everybody. Happy Wednesday. Happy April Fool's Day. I'm not a fan of this day, but I hope you guys have fun with it. Be safe, make good choices with it. But today's lesson is a lot like yesterday's, except for we're going to start looking at using multiplication and division to solve different algebraic equations. Oops, that's not multiplication, that's division. And so when we're doing this, we're going to start off by just using multiplication to solve because a lot more of you are comfortable with multiplication. And then tomorrow we'll go into using the division side of it. But basically you're doing the same thing that you did yesterday, but we're going to use multiplication and division. Your loops is I can use multiplication and division to solve algebraic equations. Goodness gracious. Target for today. So notes today, when solving an equation, you must first isolate the variable. And remember, isolate from yesterday we had talked about means just get it by itself. We want that variable, in other words, the letter. So let's say our example is t divided by 4 equals, I don't know, 5. Okay, so when we want to isolate the variable, what they're saying in that is that we want to get t all by itself. So basically, we want to get rid of that divide by 4. So the inverse, remember the inverse just means the opposite. So the opposite operation of multiplication is division. The inverse or the opposite operation of division is multiplication. We know that. Remember, 1 times any number is that number. It stays itself. So 1 times 5 is still 5. Okay, just something to keep in mind as we go through and do this. And then the last thing, 2 ways to write division are x divided by y, or we can use that bar symbol, okay? Make sure that you look at this bottom piece. Pause and read this if you need to, but it says, when solving for a variable, it is important to show all steps. Even if a particular problem seems easy, this makes it much easier to check equations and find if and where you made a mistake. As we start doing more complex problems, you need to get in the habit of showing each step you take to solve for the variable. So in other words, show your work. And some of you are rolling your eyes right now and saying, yes, Miss Loggy, we know. But I want to make sure that we've talked about this and how important it was, and this is the time for it to shine. Okay, so when we look at t divided by 4 equals 5, again, I have to get or whatever I do on one side of the equal symbol, I have to do on the other. So we had just talked about in the notes that the opposite operation of division is multiplication. So I'm going to multiply this by 4 on the left, and I'm going to multiply by 4 on the right of the equal symbol. So when I have division and multiplication, just like yesterday, that cancels each other out. So that divided by 4 and that times 4 on the left-hand side is gone now. So what I'm left with is t equals 5 times 4. And what I know is 5 times 4 equals 20. Okay, so when I solve this, some of you are probably like, what? So we're going to start with just using multiplication to solve. But what I want you to recognize that if I would go back and put 20 in for t, 20 divided by 4 is 5. So let's do a few examples, and I'm going to show you the multiplication and division, but today we're only going to focus on the multiplication for your homework and for the practice, okay? So for the very first one, it says x divided by 2 equals 4. So if we do that, we're going to multiply by 2 on both sides of that equal symbol. And what I'm left with would be the divide by 2, and the multiply by 2 gets canceled. So I'm left with x equals 4 times 2, which means x equals 8. If I go back and check, 8 divided by 2 is 4. I know I didn't make a mistake. I know I did it correct. Okay, so now let's look at this bottom one. Sorry, guys. Miss Haugen's actually texting me, which is kind of funny. So to solve w over 3 equals 12, remember that w over 3 is still just a division problem. So all I'm going to do to cancel that division out is I'm going to multiply the left side by 3, multiply the right side by 3. So when I do this, what I'm left with is I'm going to cancel out the 3's on the left. So 3 times 3 divide, I'm just left with that w. And that's equal to 12 times 3. And 12 times 3 equals 36. So if I'd plug 36 back in, 36 divided by 3 is 12. So this is what we're going to be practicing tonight for homework, but I do want to run through and just show you how to do the other side. And we're going to do this tomorrow, but it's good for you to kind of get an idea of what it's going to look like. So if I see 5f, that's the same as 5 times f. They just don't put a multiplication symbol in between it when you're doing that with algebra. So what they're telling us is if it's 5 times f, the opposite operation or the inverse operation would be to divide. So I'm going to divide by 5. And to show that, I'm just going to create a fraction basically. I'm going to draw, there's my 5f, and I'm going to draw a fraction line and put a 5 below. When I do that, what I know is that both 5's cancel each other out, and all I'm left with is that f all by itself on the left. I still have to take 60 and divide it by 5. So I'm left with 60 divided by 5, and I know that 60 divided by 5 is 12. If I do the next one, I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to divide by 10, divide by 10, because I do it whatever on one side of the equal symbol, I have to do it on the other side. So then I cancel out the 10s on the right side, so I'm left with k on the right is equal to 130 over 10. And 10 can go into 130 13 times. So k equals 13. So the division side of things seems to be a little bit trickier for some students. So we're going to spread it apart and we're going to do this part tomorrow. What we're going to focus on tonight is over here, using multiplication to solve division problems. Back here, I was getting the number I was dividing by whatever I was looking at in the beginning. So if it was divide by 2, I'm multiplying by 2. If it's divide by 3, I'm multiplying by 3. So when we look at our practice, this would be a great time, as we talked about yesterday, to pause, do these on your own, and then check your work with mine to see how you did. Okay, so we have a bunch of division problems and they look like fractions. And really all that you're going to do is you're going to still multiply by 2. And some of you are like, well, where are you getting that 2 from, Miss Loggy? I'm getting the 2 from the denominator in this case. So when I look at this, if it's divide by 2, I'm going to multiply by 2 on the left. I'm going to multiply by 2 on the right. Then I know right away that the 2 that I multiply by is going to cancel out the 2 that is already divided by. I'm going to be left with n equals 3 times 2, so n equals 6. Okay, so on this one, I'm going to multiply by 3, both sides. The 3 multiply and the 3 divide on the left-hand side of the equal symbol will be canceled. So I'm left with n equals 4 times 3, and n equals 12. So here's where I would love for you to stop, pause. I want you to try the other ones on your own and just see how you do. Challenge yourself a little bit to try this. It's really not tough once you kind of grasp that all you're doing is you're multiplying or dividing. In this case, we're multiplying by the opposite operation and then just doing normal multiplication that we know how to do. So for this one, I'd multiply by 5, that cancels. N equals 5 times 3, so n equals 15. Multiply by 7. Sorry, my handwriting's not the best on here, you guys, because I'm using a stylus on my iPad and it doesn't work the greatest always, so I apologize. So I'd get n equals 7 times 7, and n equals 49. Multiply by 2 on this one, 2, so I would cancel those out. N equals 12 times 2, and n equals 24. Next one, x over 9 equals 7, so I'd multiply by 9, cancel out on the left. I'm left with x equals 7 times 9, and x equals 63. Multiply by 4, cancel, a equals 8 times 4, and 8 times, it's supposed to be an a, and 8 times 4 is 32. So b over 10 equals 4. I multiply by 10, cancel out. b equals 4 times 10. b equals 40. So again, if I were to plug in 40 for this one, so it's b over 10 equals 4. If we know that b equals 40, and I put it in for b divided by 10, I'm going too fast. Sorry, guys. So if I put 40 in for B, 40 divided by 10 is 4. So I know without a doubt 100% that I got the right answer. That's the cool thing about algebra, is that there's always a right answer. It's not a maybe or there could be. It's always a yes or a no. So when I multiply by 2, n over 2 equals 16. Multiply by 2 on both sides. N equals 16 times 2. So n equals 32. So then I multiply by 12, x equals 12 times 3. Sorry, I'm running out of space here. X equals 36. And the last one, I would multiply by 20 on both sides, and I would get A equals 3 times 20, which gives me 60. Okay, so with that, I went through that pretty quickly. That's why I wanted you to pause and then do some on your own and then check your work. If you are lost or confused, make sure that you reach out an email or send me a Google Hangout chat, and I would be happy to kind of work with you through that. But really, remember, you're just, whatever you do to one side of the equal symbol, you're doing to the other side. And if it's division, you're going to multiply, and just keep practicing it. So your homework is in the link below. And it's also back in Google Classroom. So go either place to do your homework, and it will get you where you need to be. I hope you guys are doing well, and we'll talk to you soon.